strongly bipartisan Edward M. Kennedy Serve America Act. Alan has served on a number of boards and received numerous awards, including the Reebok Human Rights Award, the Jefferson Award for Public Service, and the Schwab Foundation Social Entrepreneur Award. Alan is also the author of the book, which you will hear more about. And as Alan writes in his book, big citizenship calls on each and every one of us to do what we can to contribute to America's ongoing journey towards a more perfect union. We, the people, the government, the private sector, philanthropy, academia, media, he challenges us to do what, as the President does, do big things and be the change. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Alan Casey.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jeff, so much for that wonderful introduction and for inviting me to be here today with all of you. I see so many friends in the audience, and it's always great for me to be back here at City Year. I sort of feel like I should break out into jumping jacks. Those of you who know us know, but I won't ask you to do that today. But it is wonderful for me to be here, and to be here with Associated Grantmakers. You know, when Michael and I were first starting City Year, AGM was one of the very first places we went. We were just out of school. We didn't know anything about anything. And we heard about this great institution where they would help you if you wanted to start a nonprofit. And people at AGM and people like Judith Kidd, who's in the audience here, who's still a terrific leader in nonprofits and philanthropy, and Newell Flather and the Hyams Foundation got behind us early. So it's particularly warm for me to be here. To be with all of you today, and I appreciate the welcome. And as Jeff said, I have recently written a book, and part of the reason I'm excited to be here is that you all represent the kind of big citizens that my book is about. You literally are the breathing, walking example. So I know today a little bit I'm going to be preaching to the choir, but I do, along with Jeff, just happen to have a copy of my book here. It isn't for sale here, as Jeff said, but you can get it on Amazon. It's still available. And I do want to talk to you a little about the book and also just some of my thoughts about the sector. The first thing you notice about my book is that it's bright orange. Now, all of you, I think, know City Year. It was supposed to be red, you know, for our great red jackets. But one of the things you find out if you write a book is that you can largely control what's on the inside of the book. But your publisher controls the outside. So the galleys were red. It was all set to be red. And then I got a call from my editor one day, and he said, you know, we gave your book to the art department, and they've got a little different idea. And I said, well, what is it? Because I thought it looked pretty good as a red book. And they said, well, we'll send it to you. We think you're going to like it. So I waited with anticipation, and then the package arrived. I ripped it open, and I pulled it out. And I looked at it, and I said, I have a bright orange book. I showed it to my little girl who's 7, Mirabelle, and she said, oh, Daddy, orange is a nice color. And so it's trying to make me feel better. But I've come to realize that there are some pretty good uses for a bright orange book. You know, if you get an extra copy, and you keep it in your car, and you break down at night, you don't need a flare. Or, you know, people have told me that, you know, if you're having trouble finding parking in Boston or you run out of quarters, just stick a copy of Big Citizenship on your dashboard, and the meter maids will walk right by. Don't tell Mayor Manito I told you that trick. I'll get in trouble. Or if you're like me, you have young kids or young grandkids that sometimes get afraid of the dark, just keep a copy of Big Citizenship in their bedroom at night, and you won't need a nightlight. But the truth is, I think of myself, like you all, as more of an activist, a doer, not as a writer or an author. And my publisher was right. I still get a kick out of when I walk into a bookstore and I see the book. You can't miss it. So they knew what they were doing, and it is fun to see it when I'm walking by stores. I wrote the book, first and foremost, out of a sense of gratitude. I mean, I see so many old friends, especially from the beginning of City Year here today, and I found that in my life, beyond meeting my extraordinary wife, Vanessa Kirsch, who is an amazing social entrepreneur in her own right and big citizen, and the birth of my 2 kids, there's been nothing more rewarding or gratifying or fulfilling than having a dream to try to make a difference and being able to share that and work with others who come forward and really literally come out of the woodwork to help make that dream possible and happen. And, you know, Michael and I get a lot of credit for being the founders of City Year, but the truth is City Year happened because of some leaders in this room, because of young people who stepped forward when it was just an idea, because of people who just came forward exercising their own idealism and their own sense of big citizenship. And I've been privileged to be part of a number of journeys like that, where people have come together. And so I wrote the book first and foremost out of that sense of gratitude as a way to say thank you. And this has really been a remarkable journey. I also wrote the book inspired by a story I heard about President Harry Truman. President Truman was one of the most modest men ever to hold the office of president. He assumed the office when FDR died, as you know. He didn't run for the office at first. And on his last day as president, a reporter called out to him and said, "Mr. President, what are you going to do now that you're leaving the highest office in the land?" And Truman, without skipping a beat, responded, "I'm not leaving the highest office. I'm assuming the highest office, that of citizen." So I also wrote the book trying to say, you know, what would our country be like if all of us, just by the virtue of living in this extraordinary place, felt that we held that office and that we are holding an office? How we participate in the service sector, in nonprofits, in politics, in voting, in civic engagement, in movements. And so that was another reason I wrote the book, to try to think about that question. I also wrote the book really to try and tell a story. And the book is basically my story of co-founding City Year with Michael, and the effort, as Jeff mentioned, to help to save AmeriCorps when it was gutted by partisanship and funding cuts 7 years ago. Starting Be the Change, a new effort around advocacy, and the Service Nation campaign that helped to bring about the Kennedy Serve America Act, and my own brief foray into electoral politics, as Jeff mentioned, just over a year ago. You know, people still ask me what the campaign was like. And I had an amazing experience, and you know, part of my message here today is that we all, as a sector, have to get more involved in advocacy and in politics and in policy, because we have experience and know-how at the grassroots level that's important. But I had an amazing experience, mostly because of the people I met. And when you run for office, it's like having a passport or permission slip to talk to anyone, anytime, about anything. And especially in these times when so many people are hurting, as you all know from the work you do, people open up to you. They share their hopes and dreams. They share their anxieties, their fears, their challenges. They share their ideas. And I met so many people who are hurting in this economy, but I also met people who had an undaunted spirit, the kind of spirit that our sector represents so well, who were willing to roll up their sleeves, rebuild, and want to see a better day. And so it was an amazing experience for me. And you know, one of the stories, like say, well, people say, well, what's some of the stuff that happened? So I'll just tell you one story. It was midnight. It was about 10 days before the election. It was a Saturday. And I'd spent all day campaigning from the morning up, you know, till late at night. And I was home and watching a documentary about Bobby Kennedy with my brother Lance, who'd flown out from California and lived on my couch for 3 months to help me out with the campaign. And Bobby's my political hero, so I figured I'm going to get some inspiration for those last 10 days. And I'm watching this documentary about Bobby Kennedy. And my cell phone rang. And I looked at the caller ID, and I saw it was my campaign manager. And I thought, oh, my God, what disaster has happened that Kelly's calling me, you know, almost at midnight on Saturday. And so I flipped open the phone, and I said right away, Kelly, what's going on? And she said, well, are you sitting down? And I thought to myself, oh, boy, here it comes. It's got to be really bad news. And so I said, yes, what's up? I'm sitting down. And she said, well, the Boston Globe just endorsed you, and it came out online. So I start hooting and hollering, high-fiving my brother. We're celebrating. We wake up Vanessa, who comes downstairs, and we're hugging and celebrating and making a lot of noise until finally we woke up our little girl, Mirabelle, who's, you know, 7 at the time, now 8. And she comes down in her stocking feet and her nightgown, and her proud daddy, I pick her up, put her on my lap, and she looks up at me and she says, Daddy, Daddy, what's all the noise about? And I look down at her and I say, well, honey, the Boston Globe just said your dad would be the best senator. And she looks right up at me and says, I already knew that. Can I just go back to sleep now? So one of the things I tell people, if you run for office, your family will keep you grounded, your kids will keep you grounded, keep everything in perspective. And I was fortunate that I definitely got that from my children and my extraordinary wife. But I have been privileged to be part of this really amazing journey, from City Year to Saving AmeriCorps, Service Nation, Be the Change, running for office. And I have come to an overall view, and that's part of what the book is about. At the micro level, big citizenship is about what each of us can do, trying to hold that office. At the macro level, it's also about an argument. I'm trying to contribute to a debate. I don't feel that I have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, but I do feel like we need a different kind of debate. And my experience in this sector has helped to inform that. You know, too much of the debate in Washington centers around the role of government. Often one side says, well, government's the answer. The other side says, no, government's not the answer, it's the problem.